Montgomery, Alabama, etched a violent page in American history during the 60s through its resistance to racial equality. It's a bit ironic that Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, then under the leadership of the late Dr. Martin Luther King, and the symbol of the black man's struggle for social dignity, is virtually on the steps of the Alabama state capitol. I'll be ascending those steps and talking with the man who was a symbol of resistance to that movement. Governor Wallace, there are many persons throughout the country who have recollections of the 1960s who speak of George Wallace as a racist. What would you say to those people?
Well, I would say to those people that I, like most people in this part of the country, have been misunderstood about many things. I've never been a racist. I always have objected to the intrusion of the federal government in trying to solve every problem, real and imagined, at the national level, and I still am. But I think the recent election, in which I was overwhelmingly elected with 84% of the vote, in which I carried every predominantly black county in Alabama by percentage points won 97%, where 80% to 85% of the people were black. That in itself ought to prove that people of all races in Alabama know George Wallace pretty well.
Your stand has primarily been that of supporting states' rights, the rights of states to govern themselves. How do you evaluate that in terms of civil rights?
Well, I evaluate that in this sense. There are certain matters that were intended by the original founders of our nation to be left exclusive to the states. No one argues the point of discrimination, or we are supposed to apply laws equally to all people regardless of who they happen to be. But the national government has intruded itself to the point that now at national governors conferences we find the governors of states all over the union complaining about the government of the country through its bureaucracy stepping in and trying to run every business, every union, every school, every phase and aspect of people's lives. And that is what we call states' rights, although now they refer to it as local responsibilities and local rights and the rights of local governments and interference in domestic democratic institutions. They sometimes don't use the term states' rights, but they mean the same thing. I've heard identical statements that governors of Alabama have made, like myself, made by the governors of New York and California and Massachusetts and Connecticut and you name it. And I think they've come to understand that we in Alabama have never been against people because of who they were and the way in which God made them, but we were against big government.
Well, it certainly seems that many other states have followed your position on that stand. What would you say your position was during the 60s when many felt that it was anti-civil rights?
Well, it was anti-big government. I feel that the civil rights of every citizen of our country is guaranteed in the Constitution of the United States. And I felt that some of the legislation that was sponsored was legislation purely aimed at property rights and the rights of local governing bodies. But no one would say that in his right mind in government that all people are not entitled to civil rights under the Constitution of the United States, regardless of his background, race, color, creed, religion, or national origin. And I say the same thing myself.
I talked with Johnny Ford, the mayor of Tuskegee, and he said some interesting things about the new George Wallace.
Some reporter asked me who I was going to vote for governor, and I simply told him George Wallace. And that was who I endorsed and support. And I in no way meant that as a method to try to encourage other people to vote for him. I just simply told him what my choice was. And my reasons were as follows. Number one, of the candidates running, I felt he was the best qualified. And I think that ought to be the preference. I mean, the guideline used whenever you're determining any candidate that's running. Secondly, I can honestly attest to the fact that over the last couple of years, my working with him, my staff, and his staff, we've shared a fair and judicious relationship. That's all I can say. He's been square. We've gotten everything that white towns have, and he's been fair, and that's all I can ask of any governor. Thirdly, I just feel that with his political sophistication, with his national prestige, and he does have some, that Alabama will get more in terms of industry, in terms of assurances of federal support, in terms of outside commercial investments. And if Alabama gets more, then Tuskegee will get more. I think he's sincere, too. I really do. I think the governor's really a deep religious man. And I think it comes out. So I don't agree with everything he does. I think he can do a much better job, and I would just like to be in a position to help him do a better job for all the people in this state.
Now, you're from the same area of Alabama.
Right. As a matter of fact, Barber County, Alabama. That's where my relatives and my folk are from. Same roots as the governor. Of course, we grew up on different sides of the streets, obviously. But over the years, the governor has, I think, has become more responsive to the needs of all the people, blacks and whites, especially those who are poor. I think he's doing a pretty good job. You know, you see all these big write-ups and stories up in New York and other places about how Wallace has got the black folks in slavery down in Alabama. You know, it's a lot of crap. I mean, I think that blacks and whites are on an equal basis in Alabama. We're all God's children. We stand on equal basis. There are some folks who don't want to accept that, but that's too bad. There are a few black races and a few white races who just feel that they just cannot possibly survive in a place where blacks and whites can work in peace and harmony. Well, I'm here to tell you that Alabama is the new frontier in this country, that the South shall rise again, and this time when she rises, she shall rise as the mainstream of America. And the difference is, this time when she rises, blacks and whites are going to be standing on an equal basis, because politics and economics are perhaps two of the most potent factors which have put us on equal basis. The Constitution says that we're all free, that we're all equal, have equal privileges under the law, and that's finally becoming a reality. The walls of racism are crumbling in the South, and we're sending a message out from the Southland to this nation that we as a people in Alabama, some of us are black and some of us are white, but in the final analysis, we're all Alabamians.
Do you think that Governor Wallace will be a force for this surge of a new South?
Well, I think that the governor is a surge for the entire nation, really. He is a good example of how people are becoming more responsive in the South. 10 years ago, the rhetoric that the governor was talking, he certainly doesn't talk that kind of language now. 10 years ago, the rhetoric I was talking, I don't talk that same kind of rhetoric no more, man. You know, I was on the corner talking about let's kill the honky and down with Whitey, you know, and let's shoot and let's kill and let's get it on. But it's a new day, man. We're sitting around the table legislating and politicking and winning concessions for our people. And when I say winning, there ain't no Uncle Toms and no sellout, man. We're taking care of business. When I mean taking care of business, I'm talking about jobs and houses and health services and social services for my people. I don't want my folk on welfare. I don't want my folks to be standing in on unemployment lines and waiting for handouts. I want my people to have jobs and be educated so that they can stand up and meet their own responsibilities. That's the reason I came back south. I came back for a very selfish purpose, to take this same system which kept my people down so long and to use this same system to help my people. And that's what it's all about. I think that the governor certainly is an example of how the South is changing, how the South is really going to be the mainstream of America. And the message we send to New York and other places, you all talk about how liberal you are up there in New York and Chicago. Well, you come on down South, we'll show you how to live together in peace and harmony.
Well, I appreciate Mayor Ford saying that. You know, he's the black mayor of Tuskegee, Macon County, which is about 80 or 85% black citizenry. And that county recently, in the general election, gave me 76% of the vote in that county for governor, including the support of Mayor Ford. And Mayor Ford knows that I have worked with city officials and people in this state, regardless of their race, ever since I've been governor of Alabama, and will continue to do so.
Mayor Ford also speaks of a new emerging South, and that it is perhaps the best place in America to live. Would you concur with that?
Well, we're all very proud of our state, and I appreciate Mayor Ford being proud of it, and the people of his county are proud of Alabama and the city. And I would say the emerging South includes what I like to say, even Oklahoma. It's in the Southern Governors Conference. I know many people consider it Western, but it's Western, Southern, or whatever you want to call it. It's a fine state. And I do say that there's no finer place to live than our own region. I don't necessarily say, I've been national now, you know, and I don't want to say that it's better to live here than it is in Ohio, because Ohio is a great place to live also. But there's no better place to live for any citizen than in Alabama or in our particular region, which Mayor Ford was talking about, the South.
In keeping with the New South and the new emerging Alabama, what would you say the status of black participation in politics and other state offices, whether appointed or state police? To what degree have blacks penetrated in these areas?
Well, you mean in Alabama?
In Alabama.
Well, we've had a number of black officials in this state for a great number of years, probably before many other states have. We have, I believe, 16, or maybe either 16 or 19 in the new legislature of our state. And we plan all to work together for the good of Alabama. We have many black mayors, we have black sheriffs, we have black county officials in Alabama, so they are citizens like anyone else, and if people want to elect a person, regardless of his color, that's their right. And we have very active participation in Alabama of the black people of our state.
What about the state troopers of Alabama? It seems that once I read that proportionately, Alabama has more black state troopers than other states in the Union.
They do. We don't like some of the requirements that have been laid down by some of the federal authorities, which have tried to destroy what we call, responsibility in the sense of qualifications. But I don't mean to say that black is not qualified, but we have always hired people in Alabama through a civil service. It's in the Constitution of our state. I've never hired a trooper in my life, but we do have a great number of black troopers in Alabama.
As a leading contender in the coming presidential elections by many polls, what do you think your position would be as far as pulling those leading votes into a third-party situation, if necessary?
Well, I haven't thought about organizing a third party. I am still in the Democratic Party and even ran for president in 1968 on the Democratic ticket in Alabama. So I've always run as a Democrat in this state. I hope that the Democratic Party learned its lesson in 1972. And in 1976, will respond with candidates and a platform that will relate to the average citizen of Oklahoma and of Alabama. Barring that not happening, I don't foresee any third party.
You've often spoken of support of the little man in America, the man who doesn't have the big political voice. How do you think, in the presidential situation, some type of relief could be made for the little man in America?
Well, when we say the little man, I've talked about the average citizen. I don't think anybody's little in the sense that we have any distinctions in rank. Some people may be economically better off than others, but we're all citizens of our country regardless of our economic status. But I've talked about the average citizen today who pays the great taxes that come from his pocket, regardless of who he might be, and that the tax system has not been equitable, and that we have exempted many who ought not to be exempted. And as a consequence, we find that the low and middle income people have paid the great burden of carrying on the government. We feel that if they would cut down some of the spending in Washington, curtail some of the foreign aid, the people who spit in our face, and cut out some of the bureaucracy, and equalize the tax structure, we could give some tax relief to the average citizen. They've talked about tax reform now since '68, when I made it a national issue. And so many people ran for Congress this time on it. I hope we get it. But that's one thing that an administration dedicated to that purpose could bring about, is a reform in the tax structure. I want to see the free enterprise system prosper, and I don't mind seeing people make money. But I do not want to see a continuation of a tax system that takes a man in the $7,000, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 bracket and almost taxes him out of existence. As a consequence, he cannot now, with all this inflation, keep his head above the water. And those are the people who need some tax relief in the country. First, through requiring those who have escaped taxes to pay and close up the many loopholes that exist that we don't have time to discuss in detail. And second, cut out some of the unnecessary governmental spending, some of the bureaucracy that runs wild, and all of this foreign aid that has gone to nations that I bet if we had all the money out of Swiss banks, that had gone to countries in foreign aid that's been stolen, in those countries in place there, would have enough to see that our military, for instance, regained its superiority over the Soviets. But the average man is beginning to tire of this, and I find many liberals today who've always advocated spending, always advocated spending more than you take in, always advocated foreign aid to every nation under the sun, whether they liked us, agreed with us, whether they fought us or not. And they are now beginning to see that the average man in Oklahoma is tired of his hard-earned money going in this fashion. So I think one of the best things that could happen in Washington would be an equalizing equity in the tax structure, and cut out some of the unnecessary governmental spending, especially in the foreign aid field.
One of the things that people most remember you for is your position against the integration of the University of Alabama. Considering what's going on now in the effort to salvage black institutions, would you take a similar stand to salvage them?
Of course, you're asking a very hypothetical question. That was many years ago, but the Board of Trustees at the University of Alabama, made up of very distinguished people in this state, self-perpetuating, not appointed by any governmental authority. They had decided on the admission policy, and I felt that it wasn't right for the federal government to take over the admission policies of a university. Had they taken the opposite stand, I would have been with the university in that particular regard. But the question of non-discrimination and discrimination, which has been defined in those days as segregated schools, are gone. and we don't have that sort of school system any longer. But up until it was done away with, it had been held to be constitutional, but no one is arguing the point that we should again make any legal fights in that direction. They have accepted the matter of non-discrimination, as we call it, but we do still object to the destruction of neighborhood schools and the matter of busing hither and yon, and we believe that black and white people both object to that. We feel that we ought to have freedom of choice at the local level, and let anyone decide, their parents decide what school that child wants to attend, regardless of who they happen to be. But don't force people to go where they might not want to go.
Well, would you say that integration is working effectively at the University of Alabama today?
Well, at the University of Alabama, of course, the University of Alabama has a fine student body, including black and white, and we're very proud of what happens at the University of Alabama. And so if you want to say working well, we are working well in this state in that regard toward a quality education for anybody regardless of color.
It was at this door that Wallace made his famous stand. Thus, Foster Auditorium has become symbolic in more ways than one. Since those times, this building has succumbed to the years, just as the attitudes of Alabamans have succumbed from their prejudiced attitudes of the past. It is now under renovation, and this renovation is symbolic of the renovation of attitudes throughout the state of Alabama. I think Coach Paul Bear Bryant summed it up very well when he referred to his players on his team.
We don't have any blacks, we don't have any whites, we just have football players.
Thus, it would seem safe to say that at Alabama, integration is working, and that now the students are looked upon not as black or white, but as students.
My mama taught me early to turn the other cheek, and she made me swear to think before I speak. She said there'll be times you'll think you haven't got a friend. Oh, but stand up tall, my child, and don't you bend. But it takes a whole lot of human feeling. I know from what I've seen that it takes a lot of human feeling to be a human being. They say overpopulation is an ever-present thorn, yet we kill each other fast as we are born. And sometimes I have to wonder what strange plasm we're made of, when we have to ask computers whom to love. Don't you know it takes a whole lot of human feeling? I know from what I've seen that it takes a lot of human feeling just to be a human being. You know, I overheard a man say that he wouldn't hurt a flea. And he said, if a fly lit on his nose, he just let it be. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm just stupid, but it's hard to understand that same man wouldn't even shake my hand. Don't you know it takes a whole lot of human feeling? I know from what I've seen that it takes a lot of human